Much for your kind participation in Swadhyasar Circle of Co-Learning and Mutual Initiative Dialogue. Today, we are going to nurture this dialogue in understanding a deep scholar of India and the world, the philosophy of S.Radhakrishnan. We are joined by respected scholars. On behalf of Vishwaneedam Center for Asian Blossoming, I welcome Professor Ramesh Chandra Pradhan, former Professor of Philosophy, University of Hyderabad, Professor Sreekala M. Nair, Director, International School of Sree, Sankaracharya Study. I extend a very warm welcome to Professor Ananta Giri, Dr. Tamanna Khosla, and all friends who present here, Professor Gyan Gloi, Miniti Pradhanji. So first I would like to invite Ananta Bhai to give a kind of brief background of today's talk.
Thank you, dear Randhir. Again, warm welcome to Professor Pradhan, Professor Nair, Tamanna, and all friends. So it is a joy for us to offer ourselves to walk and meditate with S. Radhakrishnan, the great philosopher, but he's not just a philosopher, he's also a great spiritual seeker. And philosophy as a way of living, philosophy which can touch other people and shape thoughts of other people, including have some influence in world thinking and world action. So Professor Radhakrishnan is this kind of a living philosopher. Professor Radhakrishnan, he worked on varieties of themes. He drew inspiration from Vedanta, and he tried to give it a contemporary reconstruction. He wanted to make Vedanta contemporary. He also wrote on the philosophy of Rabindranath Tagore. This is one of his early works. He interacted deeply with Gandhi. He also edited on philosophy of Gandhi. And he went on to comment that Gandhi is a great philosopher. So as we look forward to learning more about Radhakrishnan as a prelude to his birthday on 5th of September, so we wish to learn more. We are enriched by the presence and presentation of Professor Pradhan, who also studied at BHU, the same university where Professor Radhakrishnan taught, that how philosophy of Tagore and Gandhi influenced Radhakrishnan. In Indian philosophy, he was also a contemporary of Sri Aurobindo. So what might be Professor Nair, Sreekala Nair, for reflecting her thoughts on this theme of idealism and many other related concerns. And in this work, Radhakrishnan challenges us to understand the significance of intuition, this whole intuitive knowledge. And that is also a very important concern in many philosophical streams, East and West. Sri Aurobindo also talked about intuition. Edmund Husserl, the founder of phenomenology, he also talked about intuition. Jain Mohanty, reflecting on Husserl, he says that how Husserl cultivate a path of living intuition. So as we are with the philosophy of Radhakrishnan today, one theme that our respected speakers can help us understand is again Radhakrishnan perspective on intuition in a world philosophical perspective. The third theme that we can learn from our speakers, including Professor Pradhan, who has not only worked on Vedanta, he has worked on Sri Aurobindo, but he has also worked on Wittgenstein. Now, Wittgenstein and Heidegger, we are almost contemporaries of Radhakrishnan, and we wish to know if at all Radhakrishnan reflected on the philosophy of Wittgenstein and Heidegger. And finally, among many other contributions of Radhakrishnan, one is his deep journey with philosophy. What is called as comparative philosophy is inadequate to realize Radhakrishna's sadhana. It was not just compare philosophy in a superficial sense, because when we read Radhakrishna's book on the Bhagavad Gita, he read Bhagavad Gita along with many important texts and traditions of world religion and philosophy. So it's a different kind of philosophical journey, which is not just either superficial comparative philosophy or religious studies. And his work, for example, Recovery of Faith, is a very important work. And that again, it invites us to realize how things like faith are journey. And again, philosophy becomes a way of living, how philosophy can inspire us to cultivate practices of faith, which can help us recover. And Radhakrishnan wrote this on the wake of the Second World War, the destruction. And today, as we are in the midst of war and destruction, so we need to revisit the whole invitation of recovery of faith. As Professor Pradhan and Professor Nair help us, we are also enriched by the presence and presentation of Dr. Khosla, who would speak to us Radhakrishna's Hindu view of life. We should not forget that Ambedkar, Baba Saheb Bhimrao Ambedkar, in his Annihilation of Caste, he refers to Professor Radhakrishnan, which then invites us that Radhakrishna's Hindu view of life, how does it interact with Ambedkar's critique of caste in his Annihilation of Caste, as Ambedkar himself refers to Radhakrishnan in a very respectful way, in a very reverential way. He says that I may not be a deep philosopher like Radhakrishnan, but these are the questions that we have. So with this submission, so we invite Professor Pradhan first to make the presentation, and then Professor Nair and Dr. Khosla will listen to all three of them, and then we would offer them some questions, reflections, and submissions. Thank you, and we look forward to being enriched by our speakers.
Thank you, Ananta. Now I request Professor Pradhan to share his thought. Professor Ramesh Chandra Pradhan, he will be delivering his talk on the topic titled Philosophy of S. Radhakrishnan in a World Perspective. Professor Pradhan is taking some time. May I request Professor Sreekala and Nair, who is Director of International School of Sree Sankara Studies, and she has titled her presentation S. Radhakrishnan's Convictions on Indian Idealist Thoughts and Efforts Towards Cross-Fertilization of Ideas. Yes, Professor Sreekala Nair.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Thank you very much. Pranams at the lotus feet of Bhagavan Shankara. Thanks for the kind words of the one who, the professor who has introduced me. They indicate more the generosity of the speaker. If there are any claims that I have on my on the works that I have made in the field of philosophy. Well, friends, it is a laudable attempt to remember Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan, henceforth SR. Can you make the full screen? So that Professor Giri, can you make this as a full screen? I think the speakers can be made full screen.
Yeah,
Well,
we are taking, yes.
all,
Randhir, can you please help us? Randhir?
all right, to do that,
Hello,
I will go, I'll go ahead with
Randhir.
talking. So I said it is a laudable attempt, and at the outset, I congratulate Professor Giri for this initiative. uh, to bring us an opportunity to remember S.R. Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan, linking his birth anniversary with the forthcoming Teachers' Day. That is how his birth anniversary has been celebrated across the country. This is very relevant, particularly in an era where classroom teaching has been delegated to social medias and the scholarly writing to chat GPTs. In fact, the elder generation are very fortunate when compared to the present ones, where we have been taught by great masters who have asked us to by heart shlokas, the shabdas and dhados. I was a Sanskrit student, without explaining to us why we should by heart. And I also remember that they were more generous in action than in words, unlike today's teacher, including me. And the ideal those days of a teacher was that he or she should have an appearance of a cast iron, hard exterior, and a melting butter like heart, a very soft interior. That was the definition of the teacher. Today, as you all know, it is just the reverse. Well, Azad was a celebrated teacher, as you all know. I remember having read that when he was transferred from Mysore University to either BHU or to Calcutta, I don't remember exactly. His own students made him sit in a chariot and then literally pulled the chariot and paraded him through the street. That was a send off that was given by his students at that time. He touched almost all positions that an academic can dream of, with this difference that all these positions were decorated by him rather than these positions decorating him. If you and I, if we hold some position, like say for instance, vice chancellor, the vice chancellor post decorates us. But it is just the reverse with Radhakrishnan, that he seems to have decorated. When he became the vice chancellor, people said that look at the fortune of the Delhi University, that a philosopher himself became the vice chancellor, and it went on till his presidentship. When Azad was nominated as the president of India, Barton said that the clan of philosophers are indebted to this country, India, for realizing Plato's dream of a philosopher king. That was the first time the world has seen a philosopher becoming a king. I am also told that when he visited, when during his vice presidentship, when he visited Russia, the president of Russia came himself to receive him, and it seems he said, "I haven't come to receive the statesman; I've come to receive the philosopher." That was the honor the philosophers have received during that time. As the Subhashidam goes, Swadeshe Pujyade Raja Vidwan Sarvatra Pujyade. A king will be respected during his kingship within his kingdom, but a scholar will be respected always and across the across the globe. Friends, seldom we find a scholar who is so very representative of his age like Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan. On he was convinced of the deep philosophical insights this country could produce and continue till date, particularly its idealistic traditions, and on the other, being battered by the colonial cultural subjugation, he made vigorous attempts for cross fertilization of ideas to represent a true modern thought. Remember, if you remember the days of early Indologers, like the writings of William James and so on and so forth, they were all convinced that India could never have had a philosophy worth the name, for the simple reason that it was under the grip of poverty. And in the West, philosophy was a luxury for the rich. And then therefore, they could never think of a population being under the grip of poverty being honored with philosophy. Little realizing that in our country, people, when they are philosophically oriented, or when they become philosophically oriented slash spiritually oriented, they voluntarily embrace poverty, like in the case of King Janaka. But the West could not appreciate this. And even in the early part of the 20th century, we heard Aldous Huxley saying that there could never be philosophy worth the name east of Suez, which has been quoted by Professor Matilal in his masterpiece Perception. So, friends, today I'm going to bring before SR's conceptual war at two friends. I'm trying to depict that SR has fought conceptual wars at two fronts. On one, interpreting and contextualizing his favorite idealist stream, namely Advaita Vedanta. Uh, and on the other, he was also trying to build an overarching bridge between the East and the West, particularly between the bringing the commonalities of the idealist metaphysics of both traditions. Now, let me begin with my first task about revamping Advaita philosophy, which was his chosen stream of idealism from the Occidental thinking. You're all aware of his deep-rooted convictions in the metaphysics of Advaita Vedanta. If you read his volumes, Indian philosophy volumes, and several other writings, he repeatedly says that I am convinced of the worthiness of Advaita Vedanta, both as a philosophy as well as a religion. So actually, when he speaks on Eastern idealism, it is Occidental in form and Indian in content. So let's remember that. In fact, I feel he was in total agreement with, I'm trying to read in between the lines. Of course, he has written several things on Advaita Vedanta, to which I'm coming to. But I am under the impression that he was in total agreement with Sankara, because for the simple reason that questioning Shankara is not a very easy task. One has to be a Ramanuja for that. He, in his Saptavidha Anupapattis, have brought seven counterpositions questioning the validity of Maya. And nothing much worthwhile has come up after this, criticizing Shankara's philosophy, because it stands as a complete system in itself. And SR, being trained in the South by great masters, he has perfectly understood the system, and he had no doubts, no queries, or disagreements regarding that. I also remember having read a beautiful preface that he has written for Ananta Krishna Shastrigal. You all, I don't know, many of you might not know Professor Ananta Krishna Shastrigal, who hailed from Palghat, who is probably the last in the chain of scholars, the scholarly tradition, who wrote in Sanskrit. And Radhakrishnan has written a beautiful preface for that, lavishly tributing his colleague. Ananta Krishna Shastrigal was his colleague, tributing his colleague and the Sanskrit textual tradition he followed. In fact, Radhakrishnan wanted to integrate himself with this textual tradition. But for good or bad, history has preserved a different role for Dr. Radhakrishnan. He was asked to revise Advaita as befitting the ideals of modernity. The ideals of modernity, the principles of French Revolution as well, liberty, equality, fraternity, and several ideals of socialism, egalitarianism, several ideals of modernity, bringing in the humanitarian factor ahead. So, and therefore, he had to revamp Advaita Vedanta as chewable by a modern mind. And also, he had to synthesize it with the basic ontology of modern science, which has had a successful march across the century. Remember that, just a minute. So I was trying to tell you that he was trying to amalgamate it with that of the scientific conceptions of the world, where science has to credit reality to the world. Hence, Shankara's apparently, uh, Shankara's philosophy of the apparently real conception of the world has was a bit of embarrassing for SR. So he had to bring reality of the world. That was a task that he has taken upon. That was one of the major tasks that he has taken up while revamping Advaita Vedanta. So, to bring reality to the world, what he has done is he has picked up texts from Upanishads as well as from Bhagavad Gita. As you know, in both these texts, there are several, Upanishads is dialectical nature, that you know that there are contradictory assertions available in both Upanishads. In Bhagavad Gita, is not much of dialectics, but then there are contradictory positions. So, quoting these texts, Radhakrishnan has easily proved that reality is both empirical and transcendent. Even as he invariably modeled Advaita to represent the Occidental niceties in religion, he conceived Advaita both as philosophy, as metaphysics, and as religion. Professor Billy Moria, in a beautiful article titled Radhakrishnan Saving the Appearance in East-West Academy, it's a critical writing, where he points out that he ignores the divide between philosophy, metaphysics, and religion. So now, while batting for religion against the attacks from science, he denounces the popular substitutes for religion. These days, you know that those who are modern educated prefer to have humanism as their acceptable, as an alternative, a substitute religion. Radhakrishnan has been very critical of this, and he shows the shallow ontology of humanism and argues that humanism can never replace a rich religion. And subsequently, he takes up the task of establishing the validity of religious experience. Just as an introduction, Professor Giri was speaking about validating intuitive experience. Now, intuitive experience or aparoksha jnana has been brought to discussion on several occasions by Dr. Radhakrishnan, and he argues, it's not his own argument, it is the argument placed by Shankara himself, wherein he says that Aparoksha Jnana is immediate in nature, quite like Pratyaksha. And why it is not called Pratyaksha and instead Aparoksha? Because this is a different kind of immediacy, where in Pratyaksha, of course, you have intentionality, where the consciousness is necessarily being adjunct with intentionality. There is an object that is intended, while in aparoksha jnana, the consciousness is immediate but with no intentionality. So, this intuitive nature of religious experience has been established with the help of the Western religious ideas as well. But today, you know that those days when Dr. Radhakrishnan was writing, philosophy of religion has been set aside by positivists, and it has had a re-entry much later. By then, Radhakrishnan was no more. So today, you know that philosophy of religion occupies a central stage in philosophy, in contemporary philosophy, and tall epistemologists like Albin Plantinga argue that religious experience is as foundational as a sensual experience. You know that in epistemology, there is a theory called foundationalism. Now, what do the foundationalists say? Foundationalists say that sensual experience are so foundational that you need no justification to substantiate them. So now Plantinga says that quite similar to that, religious experience also do not need any justification to establish that, because both are immediate and therefore akin, similar in nature. But all these arguments were non-available during his time. So in his volume, he makes great efforts to convince his Western readers the infallibility of Vedas, yet another presupposition that underlies in Shankara's theory. If you remember, there are three pramanas: Shruti, Yukti, and Anubhava, subscribed by Shankara. And Shruti stands as the prime most pramana. And he says when there is anything that contradicts, when the inference comes to contradict with Shruti, hold the Shruti. And Shankara is never ambiguous about this. So Shruti Pramanya is primary in Advaita Vedanta. And of course, you find him struggling to establish the textual tradition, but he picks up the right tools. I remember that he has picked up the tools of Schleiermacher's hermeneutic theory to establish the validity of the scriptures. And today we do exactly the same. You know, in order to establish Shabda Pramana, we pick up the tool of hermeneutics. So he was doing the right thing even those days. And there were several other presuppositions that Shankara has had, which is not acceptable to the Western mind. For instance, um, uh, uh, subjugating his philosophy um, or his acceptance of the tradition. Shankara, for instance, says, Asambradaya vida shastra vidobi murgavad upekshaniyaha. Even if a person is very scholarly, he should be discarded if he is asambradaya vid, if he is not a traditionalist. So this subjection to the tradition is yet another characteristic of Shankara's philosophy, which is again problematic when we come to the modern thought. And he knew all this, but he could not, the problem with Radhakrishnan, particularly of that age, not only Dr. Radhakrishnan, was this, that he could not tell the West that, look, this is a different game. Giri was referring to Wittgenstein. So the later Wittgenstein has spoken about the games and the different rules, that the football is a different game with regard to cricket, and you can't make a comparison between them. So this is a different game altogether. But he could not say that during those days. Instead, he struggled to synthesize both these civilizations, trying to bridge between them. Yet another bold step that he has taken while revamping Advaita Vedanta is to bring in the Sarvamukti concept, which was in fact brought by Appaya Dikshita himself in a traditional form, reinstated by Swami Vivekananda. And he theorizes on the Sarva Mukti, because from a modern perspective, Mukti cannot be a privilege of a handful of people. So, as such, attempts to revamp Advaita Vedanta was not something unique to SR. You see several such attempts during 19th and 20th century, like, several of them. Sri Aurobindo, Sri Narayana Guru, Chatambi Swamigal, there are several of them. Swami Vivekananda, several of them have attempted to revamp Advaita Vedanta, but it's very hard to say how far they are successful. It is good that they lay their hand. It means that Advaita is still relevant. But whether such attempts are appreciable or have they succeeded is a different question altogether. In fact, no such improvisations have been greatly appreciated, for the simple reasons, my view, for the simple reason that it is bad to meddle with a story perfectly written. Shankara's story is a perfectly written story, and you find it bad to meddle with it. So, this is generally been viewed, but nevertheless, when you lay your hands on Advaita Vedanta and you try to remold it, what is valuable in this whole exercise is that you are taking Shankara seriously and you are trying to bring him to, or contextualize him. Not to talk about his larger struggle. I told you that he has had a war on two fronts. To speak about the war at the other front, uh, that is to bring an overarching bridge between the East and West. If you go through many of his works, like East and West in Religion, Eastern Religions and Western Thought, East and West and Religion in a Changing World, in many of those, you'll realize that a comparative religion attempt has been uh, the method or the intention. In fact, if you go through this, you'll see that comparative religion was one of his obsessions. He begins his exercise quoting Alexander the Great, who abandoned the view that non-Greek world was barbarian and fit to be only slaves. So through him, Nestor brings out his basic conviction that all men possessing wisdom and virtue are of one family. Now, who are these men who possess wisdom and virtue? Those who subscribe to idealism. See, these are certain basic convictions of SR. He thought that a right mix of European humanism and Asian religion would take humanity ahead. So, a fine mix of European humanism and Asian religion. By religion, he means the ideal streams of Indian thought. A right mix of them would alone would take humanity ahead. Now, note that by religion he means philosophy, and by philosophy he means his favored stream of philosophy, namely idealist brand. Now, for this cross fertilization, he has chosen idealism as a philosophy that belonged to both East as well as West. He was convinced that an idealist, I'll quickly wind up. So he was convinced that an idealistic way of life alone would take you to a fulfilling life. While stipulating on idealism, he amalgamated theories available across the globe and compiles his understanding on idealism, borrowing from Plato, Hegel, Bradley, British idealists, and make, cross fertilize it with that of Upanishadic idealism, that of Shankara, Nagarjuna, Ramanujan, and so on and so forth. And at the end, he comes up with the following commonalities that he sees across both the traditions. What are the commonalities? An idealist view finds the universe as having meaning and value. So, universe has a meaning and value, and values are the dynamic forces that drive the universe. For the East, the absolute value is consciousness, while for the West, say for instance, for Plato, the absolute goodness was the value. And the world is intelligible only as a system of ends. A teleological, a purposive universe is common to all varieties of idealism. Here, issues like whether an object is a particular or general, for instance, or whether the knower and the known, as the Swatantra Vijnanavada Buddhists would argue, is all not relevant according to SR. So, this idealistic way of life demands a spiritual dimension to your being, and it focuses on that mood of reflective inquiry and self contemplation, that anxiety of mind to know the things spiritual, in which is the true dwelling place of man lies. Now, criticizing the absolute materialist, he says that however hard you materialists would try to retain reality as concrete, reality always slips into obscurity.
Recording in progress.
He brings in the example of quantum physics, where the quantum slips from the concrete reality and then moves on to the category of the obscure. Thus, joining hands with Hegel, Essa says that every philosophy worth the name, will have an idealist flavor. The binaries that idealism invariably will have, like the binary between the Atman and the Anatman. If Plato, it is the form and the object, the real and the parent. This binary, which has been severely criticized, but is an essential ingredient for idealism. But Radhakrishnan points out that this binaries are prevalent even amongst positivists. For instance, don't they make a division between facts and truth? So, thinking in terms of binary is part of every philosophical exercise. On Indian side, he points out that the realist traditions, in fact, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, Yoga, Mimamsa, all are realist traditions. They have no serious disagreements with idealist traditions. And therefore, thus he argues that the idealist view of life is not expressed in one single pattern. It is of many colored and its forms are also varied. But there are crisscrossing threads that run between them that shows that they're all but products of one same spirit. SR's efforts towards cross fertilization of idealist thought fruitified in the emergence of several comparative religion departments across the West, which interestingly continue to remain as religious comparative religion departments despite the great efforts made by senior professors like Matilal Mahante, several of them, Shubjivan Bhattacharya, who tried to bring in the philosophical aspects of Indian philosophy. But somehow, these people could not convince the West as Radhakrishnan could, and therefore the department remains, departments, all of them remain or continue to be as comparative departments of comparative religion. Now, this appraisal will not be complete. My appraisal of Dr. Radhakrishnan will not be complete without a critical mark because we philosophers always tribute a thinker with critical, with the garlands of criticism, as we say. So now it's evident that SR, like his peers, was impressed by the intellectual niceties of the West, and it is, he has felt that we need to model them, and that was very, very vivid, and was too eager to draw parallels between the two traditions, lest Indian philosophy will remain as bundle of rituals and blind beliefs. True. This is evident in his writing, but let us, as very often we draw comparison between Das Gupta's and Radhakrishnan's volumes, and we say that Das Gupta addressed the natives while Radhakrishnan addressed the Western audience. True, all this is fine, but let's discount this, keeping in mind the period in which he flourished. Let's also remember that even after a century, we are not immunized from this tendency of scaling up our ideas with that of the West very often. Till recently, I used to do it. Now, when I'm confining myself to textual studies, Sanskrit textual studies, I'm over this disease of making, comparative studies. So the colonial rule has created a great cultural and political insecurity in all of us. In fact, that insecurity prevails even today. And its shadows fell on philosophy as well. Like many others of his time, the eagerness to establish the Swaraj in ideas was evident. And today, after years have rolled down. Today, we know that history did not vindicate this proposal put forth by Radhakrishnan and his other peers, despite the fact that during these years, the West has had several opportunities for conceptual transactions with India. We have been talking. There are global conferences, and the West has been in conversation with the other side. But it is not the case that we are trying to see all types of realism in one pattern as Radhakrishnan envisioned, and all idealisms as having some commonalities. It's not the case that Nyaya's realism and Russell's realism are put under the same banner. No, that's not the case. Because why is it? Because we also know that there is no easy way to undertake cross-cultural studies. As an epistemologist, I realize how difficult it is even to place get a problem in the Indian context, because the way that you conceive jnana or prama is pretty different from the type of JTB kind of knowledge that the West speaks. So, yeah, because every thought is embedded in the native culture, language, and tradition, and a quick mix of both will fetch little result. Also, Isaiah's dream to combine European humanism and Eastern religion draws criticism. Because, let us think, is it that humanism alone is all that is worthwhile in European conceptual understanding? No, not at all. You read them, medieval thinkers like Saint Augustine, Anselm, and all that, tears will roll down your eyes. Beautiful writing. And also, how can idealism alone represent Indian wisdom? Is it fine to set aside other streams of thought? So, in fact, here, if you closely watch or look at Indian philosophical arena, here idealism, realism, and phenomenalism all grew side by side, adding beauty to the conceptual garden of our country. And it is least recommended that we just pluck the idealist flowers alone and cross match it with the same kind of flowers of idealism from the West and then make a bouquet out of it. It is not recommended because bouquets have smaller life, while the garden is one which is enduring, or which has an enduring lifespan. Of course, there is nothing wrong in juxtaposing similar ideas provided one enlightens or enriches the other. But any tendency to assimilate something, which is seen as a common tendency of all these thinkers during that time. Say P.T. Raju, Malkani, K.C. Bhattacharya, all of them have exhibited this tendency of assimilation. This is very dangerous and has not been appreciated down the history. Even among them, for instance, Malkani says that it is not right that Radhakrishnan has projected the spiritualistic face of India. So there is a difference even among amalgamating or assimilating tendencies. There are divergence among them. Also, we realized down the years that such attempts of blurring the boundaries of East and West, in fact, J.N. Finlay mischievously named it as the Oriental blurring, brought little respect of our thought. Let us stand as Indian thought, and we don't have to blur the divide between the East and West to claim uh, authenticity. But all these do not, this small criticisms that I have, with which I wish to garland my uh, predecessor, Professor Radhakrishnan, does not mean to demean his role, the crucial role that he has played as a doyen of Indian philosophy at a time when everybody heard philosophy, the natives as well as the foreign. Everyone heard Indian philosophy through him, and we cannot forget that period, and it marks history. Salutations to this great master. And I am also been fortunate to have studied in an institute which was named after Dr. Radhakrishnan. Madras University, at that time, the Department of Philosophy was named as Dr. Radhakrishnan Institute for Advanced Study in Philosophy. Now it is not a center of advanced study anymore. So thank you very much for permitting me to give an appraisal of Dr. Radhakrishnan's works, critically looking at him. That is how philosophers tribute each other. And I rejoiced thinking about him, going back to those days, the worries that the woes and the worries that they had, the ways they were forced to philosophize. Now we are much more comfortable position, but we cannot even imagine the troubles that they would have had during the colonial cultural subjugation. Thank you very much, Professor Anandagiri, for this opportunity.
Thank you,
Thank you so
Professor
much.
Nair. In the meantime, Professor Pradhan is joining, and
He had joined.
we
He
might
had joined us.
we might have one technical problem. I request all participants, suppose the Zoom link gets disconnected, kindly rejoin in the same link, please. This is an unforeseen technical difficulty we might foresee. So now, Professor Pradhan, please.
Thank you. I will be joining from the mobile because my computer is not really responding. So thank you, Professor Giri, for inviting me to speak on this occasion. And I'm thankful to Mr. Randhir for his help, technical help, for arranging the audio and all that. So uh, it is really a great occasion to remember Dr. Radhakrishnan, the great philosopher of India, in spite of the fact that we may disagree with him on many points, as Professor Nair has rightly pointed out. We cannot forget the fact that he was one of the greatest minds that our country has produced, not only in the philosophical arena, but also in the broad sense of culture, society, and vision for humanity. What I will speak today is how he was acceptable to the world at large as a philosopher and, of course, as a statesman, being the president of India at one time. Uh, my job is to find out the place that he has created for not only for himself but also for the country that he represented, that is India, and its philosophy uh, in the face of the world community. So I will highlight the kind of bridge that he built between uh, the East and the West. That was the point which Professor Nair also pointed out, that such a bridge perhaps was not that strong as Radhakrishnan was trying to build. What I will suggest is that Radhakrishnan did build a very strong bond between the East and the West. As I see him, uh, he was not just an Indian philosopher, but also a world philosopher. My emphasis is on the aspect of his relevance of the philosophy of Radhakrishnan, relevance to the entire world. So, in that sense, I can justify how he is a world philosopher. Let me try with the idea that Radhakrishnan was deeply rooted in the Indian tradition. And he represented not the entire Indian tradition as we might think. He never claimed that he is a Naik or he's a Buddhist, but he was definitely an Advaitian, a great admirer of Sankaracharya. So, being rooted in the India tradition and having commented on the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita and perhaps Brahma Sutras, one cannot deny that he belonged to the tradition of the Vedantians, which was represented by Shankara, then represented by uh, in the by Swami Vivekananda and many others. So Radhakrishnan remained rooted in his Vedantic spiritual tradition. So it will be wrong to say that he uh, clubbed all philosophical traditions of India into one branch, that is Vedanta. He didn't do that. In fact, he did justice to all the systems in his 2 volumes of Indian philosophy. That is the great masterpiece that he has produced and which has remained unexcelled by anybody, let alone by S.N. Dasgupta. The point to be noted is that having rooted in the Indian tradition, especially the Vedantic tradition, he developed a worldview which could be called broadly Vedantic worldview, but in a more non-Vedantic terminology, it could be a worldview centered around what he called a religious point of view or a spiritual point of view. It would be not wrong to say that this spiritual point of view he derived from the Vedantic tradition. Now, with this spiritual point of view, which is also characterized as the idealistic point of view, which has been highlighted by Professor Nair, and an idealistic view of life is a masterpiece. In fact, it combines the entire philosophical thought that he has cultivated, he has expressed and propagated through his innumerable writings. So that book really contains the way he has tried to combine the philosophy of the East, especially of India, and of the West. So there is no mistake in his thought that there is a great affinity between the idealistic thought of India and the idealistic thought of the West. If we read that text thoroughly, we'll find how easily he has found that the human spirit, or what he called the spirit, is common to all mankind. If that would have not have been the case, if what we call Brahman in the Vedanta and what Hegel, for example, calls the spirit, or what the Westerners call the reason, or what we now call consciousness, if that would not have been universal, and if that would not have been common to all mankind, then Advaita itself will be a false philosophy. That means Advaita will lose its greatness if that is not the truth. That spirit is common to all mankind. And Radhakrishnan emphasized this commonality between commonality of the spirit among all races of the world. He never believed that the West physically, geographically is different, and culturally perhaps it is quite evidently different, but spiritually, morally, it could not be the case that East and West do not see eye to eye. That is what was Radhakrishnan's way forward in taking the spiritual point of view to the entire world. This is evident in his book, The Recovery of Faith, to which Professor Giri has referred, that was a great book because it is the recovery of faith, which was his permanent philosophical commitment. He wanted to show that the modern world is in need of a deep spiritual faith. Though he called it a religion, because this word religion is much misunderstood, not only in the contemporary world, but also earlier, because of the things that have been negative things that have been associated with religion. But Radhakrishnan did take the positive approach to religion. He used the word religion more in the spiritual sense of the term. For that, we need refer to his great book, another great book, Religion in the Changing World. And also his other book, which is quite famous, Eastern Religions and Western Thought. Though he did refer to the historical religions, but he was not bound by those religious boundaries. He really developed a new interpretation of religion as a religion of the search for truth, the search for the ultimate reality, and religion as a profound spiritual experience. If this definition of religion is acceptable to even the most rationalist philosophers, then we can definitely say that Radhakrishnan was trying to unite all cultures, all religions, and all races under a unified spiritual umbrella. that could be expressed in so many ways. It could be that spiritual umbrella can be called the spiritual fellowship of all men. And Radhakrishna's commitment was to this fellowship of all men. If we read his inaugural lecture at the Oxford University, when he really joined as the Spalding professor, the lecture that he delivered on 20th October 1936, it is called the unborn soul, something like that. Yes, the world's unborn soul. This was his inaugural lecture, but that shows the kind of view of the humanity he had in mind while speaking to the Oxford philosophers. There he combined two things. He gave the idea that it is the spiritual fellowship of humanity which can be the next step forward uh, from the present age. He gives a deeper analysis of the present age and the malaise, which he found out to be a spiritual malaise, a spiritual sickness, as he sometimes tells us. And the way forward is to get over the sickness by appealing to the common universal spiritual affinity between all human races. If that idea is intelligible, and I think it is intelligible, and it is rationally acceptable, then definitely he was speaking to uh, a wider audience, not only at Oxford, but the entire mankind. In that sense, wherever he talks about the human race, the humanity, and the spiritual fellowship of all human races, he did mean that there is a spiritual truth which we must search for. And this spiritual truth is that which bind all the human beings, all the human beings who are in search of truth. So let me come to some of the philosophical ideas which he has developed in his philosophical writings. One of them is, which he really derives from Vedanta, that human beings are not physical beings alone, that human beings have a spiritual dimension which is called self or Atman in Indian terminology. So this is the fundamental truth that he accepted, that the truth, the reality that we are really searching for is this spiritual reality which all human beings share, and which is the common, the reality which is universally present in all human beings. This is exactly a thought he derived from the Upanishads and the Vedantic philosophy itself, that all human beings have the same spiritual self in them, which is different from the body itself. Now, this idea is not only true of Indian, especially Vedantic thought, but also many of the Westerners believe, accepting the materialist, of course, and that there is a spiritual, a higher self in all human beings. The ways of expressing this truth may be different, but all agree, excepting those who wish to disagree philosophically, that there is a higher self in man. And this higher self really is the ultimate truth, which Vedantins have called Brahman or Atma. Radhakrishnan is committed to this fundamental truth. Second, that the world that we live in, the universe in which we live, is not just a physical, mechanical, cosmic entity. He defies all the scientific explanations that have been offered over the years, and especially in the beginning of the 20th century, when science had flourished, and the scientific explanation was veering towards a materialistic explanation of the universe. Radhakrishnan, like many of the Vedantins, in fact, most of the Vedantins, believed that the universe is not just a mechanical physical system. It is an expression of a divine reality. It is the expression of Brahman, that the world is an expression of a higher reality, which we can call Brahman. That means in philosophical terms, we can always say that the universe is not just physical. Now we are also realizing that the universe is not just physical, because there are conscious entities in the universe. But as a Vedantin, Radhakrishnan goes beyond these ways of expressing the truth by saying that the universe itself is a spiritual organic entity. By spiritual, he means here is the expression of the spirit, which we call Brahman, which Hegel called spirit, which many others have called a reality, which is like consciousness. So consciousness, if Brahman is the ultimate consciousness, the universal consciousness, the universe itself is an expression of that consciousness. This is the bold idealistic view that Radhakrishnan propounded and defended. On this, he was not alone. The entire Western world was trying to figure out how to best explain this universe, not in just in terms of matter, in terms of what we call the matter and energy, but in terms of consciousness, in terms of spirit. So Radhakrishnan is in the company of great philosophers like Plato, like Kant, and like Hegel, and later idealists like Bosanquet, Bradley, and many others, that the world could not be just explained in physical terms. As he often says, the universe is not an accidental conglomeration of the physical entities or physical atoms. He says this could not be the final truth about the universe. We are now explaining or exploring the idea that mind is also playing a great role in the very organization of the universe. So if this is true, then Radhakrishnan is really committed to the idealistic thought, which is not just an apology to defend religion against science, but it is really a looking for insightful understanding of the universe. So idealism was not a passing phase, I can understand. It was not just a reaction to realism. It was a reaction to materialism, naturalism, and many other short-sighted views about the universe. So coming to the point, why he was opposing materialism, scientism, and many other isms which are associated with this kind of understanding of the universe. In many of his books, he expresses his anguish over the fact that we have taken shortcut routes or shortcuts to the understanding of the universe in terms of only scientific categories. He takes to task the materialist, first of all, the communists, and later version of materialism is communism, that they have not understood the very nature of human reality. Materialism has been successful, of course, in some quarters, but it has never survived as the whole world philosophy, as a world philosophy. Materialism is a short-sighted view precisely because it reduces everything to matter. It is a reductionist view of the universe. So the first opponent of Radhakrishnan, first object of criticism of Radhakrishnan is materialism, along with naturalism, that we have imbibed from science the only method in which we can explain the physical phenomena, and that is the method of observation and experiment, and the method of collecting the data to build a picture of the universe. Now, this is where naturalism has always faulted itself, has been at fault, and it has really given rise to various philosophies which have been, even now they are very popular, a naturalistic view of mind, nature, then human beings. But Radhakrishnan was never satisfied with this so-called scientific view of the universe. He thought science itself is an incomplete incomplete way of understanding the universe, because science does not take into account the human reality itself, the human self, which Radhakrishnan calls the spiritual reality. The human subjectivity is not something which can be reduced to the physical processes in the brain. And Radhakrishnan anticipated that there are philosophers coming in the 21st century who will really abolish the mind itself. And there are philosophers galore in the West now who take mind as nothing but brain. So they abolish the entire structure of human thought, emotion, and rest of it, and reduced it to a sizable sum of physical processes. This is a very short-sighted reductionist view of the universe. No idealist, no philosopher for that matter, can be satisfied with this explanation. So Radhakrishnan was right in his objection to these pseudo scientific explanations, and I call them pseudo because they do not really satisfy the human spirit itself. They are really, they fall short of explaining the universe, which includes human beings, which includes the conscious realities like the animals and the rest of it. So in that sense, Radhakrishnan had a response to those philosophers who had deviated from the rich tradition of spirituality, both in the East and the West. So this is one of the points. Let me come to another point which is relevant here. The conflict between science and religion, this has been a part of any modern philosophical discourse. Science has taken the upper hand, everybody knows, from Descartes onwards in the modern history of Europe, and perhaps thereafter, science took the center stage of human thought. Science, in fact, grabbed the entire truth for itself. Science was synonymous with truth. And religion, even in its decadent form, though it was itself rejected by what we call the Renaissance and also the Enlightenment, that religion as a superstition was definitely rejected. But science, religion as a true search for God, or whatever name we can give to the ultimate reality, that never ceased to be relevant to human spirit. The human spirit itself, as Radhakrishnan says, demanded religion. So religion has remained with human beings for whatever reasons as one of the preoccupations of the human mind. Whatever form the religion has taken, from the primitive to the more organized religions, from the organized religions of many cultures, I need not name them, but all of them have really started with a great search, with a search for some essential truth about man and the universe. That search for the reality, though, was definitely distorted in the course of history, but it remained a permanent feature of the human mind. Even the great Kant could not deny the relevance of religion. That is why he said, he was a great critical thinker. He said, he talked of a religion within the limits of reason alone. That means even reason has to accept the relevance of religion. So Radhakrishnan was a defender of religion. He was not a defender of any decadent religion. Let us be very clear. Otherwise, we will miss his mission. He did not defend decadent Hinduism, nor did he defend decadent Christianity or decadent Islam or any other form of religion. He was for the true religion, which he sometimes called the spiritual religion or rational religion. Sometimes he calls just the faith, rational faith in the ultimate reality of the universe. If that kind of religion could be understood in Radhakrishnan terms as a kind of that he thought as a possible way forward for mankind. Now, if we take science as our ultimate model for search for truth or search for reality, then we will end up in just either materialism or some kind of scientism or some kind of naturalism. But Radhakrishnan said we have to go the other way, that is the way of spirituality or the way of understanding the universe and man spiritually. If that could be his way of thinking, then perhaps he could unite the mankind. As I started in the beginning, that he was interested in uniting mankind spiritually. Now, through science, we cannot really build up that spiritual fellowship among the human beings. Science, to some extent, unifies all scientific thinkers, but it leaves the society behind. It leaves human beings behind. So unless we take the spiritual way of thinking, and also we take the religious way of thinking in Radhakrishnan's terms, we cannot unite all all mankind. So in that sense, I suggest that Radhakrishnan's way of understanding the universe and the human race or the human society itself was built on his sound conviction that human reality or the spiritual reality of all human beings is universal. And this truth dawns upon anybody, including, for example, Sri Aurobindo, who talks about a divine race, a spiritual race. He doesn't mean that everybody will be spiritually perfect. What he suggests is that we can come together. Instead of building barriers amongst ourselves, we can build bridges. So both Radhakrishnan and Sri Aurobindo were bridge builders because they wanted to see a humanity under one kingdom of the spirit. To borrow from Kant, the idea of kingdom of the ends. In fact, Kant had the idea that all human beings are moral beings and they are the ends in themselves. And therefore, it is a kingdom of rational beings. And Radhakrishnan and Sri Aurobindo, for example, go beyond and they say it is a kingdom of the spiritual beings. So in this sense, one can say that Wittgenstein, Radhakrishnan's idea of a universal spirit, idea of a universal society is very much intelligible, even if it is not actually real, but it is an ideal which humankind has to follow. Let me come to, if I am allowed another 5 minutes, I will just touch upon two more things. How he, what he thought about, say, the ultimate aim of life, because he was not only a philosopher of religion, philosopher of the spirit, but also he was a philosopher of man. So man was at the center of his philosophical landscape. He took man to the height of what we call spirituality. He never neglected what we call morality. Generally, we think to be spiritual is to be morally free. That is not what he meant, that we have to be moral in order to be spiritual. We have to cultivate virtues of the mind and the soul. And therefore, we can only become spiritually perfect, or we can try to be spiritually perfect. So in this sense, he emphasized on morality as a part of the social progress and also part of a culturally developed life. No human race can be perfect spiritually unless it cultivates strong moral grounds in its own society. What are the moral values which Radhakrishnan would have espoused? One is the compassion, the kindness and compassion, peace, and understanding of the others. So this is the way the philosopher looks at the totality of mankind and asks, like Kant, for example, to become moral, to follow the rules of morality or to rules of dharma. So Radhakrishnan was a defender of morality. None of his writings he has given any idea that there can be religion without any moral basis. So for him, morality and religion, morality and spirituality go together. To conclude, I will just suggest that if we take Radhakrishnan's entire philosophical corpus, what we find most interesting and most attractive is this, that he has a very, very profound understanding of human history and human society. He looks at the universe, looks at the human world as a whole. Very few philosophers nowadays have this capacity to think as a whole. The idea of thinking as a whole, thinking like the great minds of the past, that time is over. Now we think very minutely, we become specialized, we think about this and that and exclude the entire big picture. Radhakrishnan is the great thinker in this sense that he never thought about only, say, a part of a philosophical discourse. He never took any idea just as an isolated idea. He put it in a global form, in a totality. He really projected those ideas. On this, he thinks like a Plato and works and really expresses himself like a Kant. And as Professor Giri had suggested, whether Wittgenstein he ever referred to, he was not in that kind of philosophical mold of the 20th century, which dominated the West at that point of time, called linguistic philosophy or philosophy of language or analytic philosophy. He was not interested, but in his writings, he has referred to AJR, he has referred to logical positivist. The point is that in his global structure of thought, he did not find any time or he didn't find any test for any thinking so narrowly confined to language or to a few concepts. So that is why he did not talk about Wittgenstein. He refers sometimes to Husserl, sometimes to many others, but he remains at this idea of the total picture of the universe. I think I personally have been an humble student of Radhakrishnan's philosophy. I had a great admiration from my younger days about his global thinking. So this global thinking we may call a metaphysical thinking, a speculative thinking, a thinking of a very abstract level, but that is what makes philosophy so attractive. If philosophy have been always busy with language or even epistemology and saying nothing about the rest of the universe which we try to know, perhaps philosophy would have been a very narrow subject. But philosophy is never a narrow subject. Radhakrishnan's liberated philosophy from its narrowness of being sectarian, sampradaya. He never believed in sampradaya philosophy. So he could never have said, I am a Naik and nothing else. He could have never said, I am a Vedantin and nothing else. No, he thinks in a global way, just as the true Vedanta thinks in a global way. True Vedanta doesn't divide itself into different houses. I think that is the wrong way Vedanta has been divided into quarreling houses. And we have ended up somewhere in Sampradaya, in some kind of sectarianism. Vedanta and sectarianism cannot go together. Vedanta is a global philosophy. So also Radhakrishnan's is a global philosophy, whether people accept it or not. When I read a page of Radhakrishnan, I feel so enlightened. But if I read many other thinkers, I may not feel enlightened. So Radhakrishnan remains a permanent treasure. Radhakrishnan's thoughts remain a permanent treasure of the Indian intellectual history and world historical intellectual history, world philosophical literature. So I think I will conclude with this. People may think I am glamorizing him. I am really taking him out of the context by suggesting that Radhakrishnan remains a true representative of Indian thought, some part of Indian thought, the Vedantic thought, and also a true representative of the global search for truth. His famous little book, My Search for Truth, will reveal us the grand plan of this man who started his journey from Tirutane, which is a very small place near Tirupati, traveled through Mysore, where he lectured, and went to Calcutta, then to Banaras, Oxford, and being ambassador at USSR. All these glorious achievements remaining as they are, the excellent mind of this man who was born in a colonial India, but who liberated himself all forms of colonialism. He claimed that he never studied in the West, but he taught in the West. He said, I have come to teach in the West. I didn't study in the West. So that was the kind of spirit he had. He was a true nationalist. Definitely he was a nationalist. He was also internationalist at the same time. He was a global thinker, a global humanist and spiritualist. With these words, I pay my homage to this great thinker of our country. Thank you, Professor Giri, and thank you all in the audience for your for your kind patience, kind hearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Chandra. It was really a very profound presentation
Thank
and
you
a
so much.
deep reflection on this great philosopher who nurtured the long living legacy of Indian philosophy. Thank you so much. Now I request
Thank you
Dr.
so
Tamanna
much.
Tamanna to share her
Yes,
reflection.
sure, sure. Thank you so much. I mean, my greetings to all the people present and especially esteemed professors. And thank you for giving me the time to share my views as a young seeker of Advaita theory and a scholar who is keen on understanding, just like Professor Radhakrishnan, about not just Indian philosophy, but also about Western tradition of religion and the thinkers as they have perceived the world. And in fact, I have just like him, the way he has tried to bridge the gap between West and East. I mean, I have tried my level best to work. My book on Ayn Rand's individualism and Advaita Hinduism has attempted at this project. And I'm very impressed by Professor Radhakrishnan's views, and I have my own views, and I like to give them personally as a tribute to him and understanding his philosophy. So basically, I'll be speaking about the Hindu way of life, which was pronounced by Radhakrishnan ji in a very elaborate manner. And he spoke about the Advaita tradition, the new Advaita tradition, and which understands that you have to accept diversity in a big way. So what we need to do is understand all religions, all cultures, all civilizations as they are, rather than put them into their own structures, and allow them to be the way they want to be. At the outset, what Radhakrishnan ji is saying is that he's trying to redefine Hinduism, not redefine, but like taking it way back to the Vedanta period and bringing it to the new India, and trying to convince not just the Indians who were, some of the scholars at that time who were against the Hindu tradition and the kind of inequality which existed. So, and the Western tradition as such, which was talking about things like equality, liberty, etc. So he wanted to bridge the gap between West and East. And so it's as far as I understand, according to him, Hinduism is a very difficult religion to define, but nonetheless we can say that it is a religion which kind of bridges the gap between monism and dualism. So what dualism is going to do, as far as I am kind of trying to give my views as well, along with Professor Radhakrishnan's views. And to many, it may seem that it's been named without any content. It is a museum of beliefs. So it's so be it. It is, and we accept all. And Advaita religion accepts all kind of diversity in its very essence. So so what we need to understand is that according to him, um, he tried to make the West more comfortable with Indian view of illusion. Now, what is illusion? Illusion, according to him, is Maya. Now, Indian civilization is critiqued majorly by the West on this concept. But what we need to do right now is that we have to understand that Indian tradition, especially the monastic tradition, is extremely deep. It is extremely deep, and it has to be delved majorly inside itself, to make you understand that this is what Hinduism is trying to say, and all cultures need to have a dialogue, a hermeneutic dialogue with Hinduism. And it's not to say that other religions are not saying the correct thing, but, and Radhakrishnan ji understood that point, and he did not demean any religion, or he did not say that my religion is superior, and that is what is the essence of Advaita. So, I mean, the Maya is illusion of the world. Now, as an individual person is born, she or he is born as a person, and the person dies as an individual. You don't take your wealth, you don't take your family, you don't take your anything along with you, but it's just the case that you come as an individual and you go as an individual. So here the Gandhian theory would look attractive to Radhakrishnan ji, and it's the Brahmgyan talks about the fact that an individualist man, which the Brahmgyani eventually becomes, and is considered to be superior to the deities also. Not just the deities who are present in the heavens, but also to the trinity of gods, Shankara, Vishnu, and Brahma. The guru, the Brahma, is considered to Brahman, is considered to be superior to any of these gods as well. So an individualist is the man who recognizes recognize the inalienable individualistic rights of the man, and is individualistic herself. She understands that she has come alone and she'll go alone. She'll have a middle path where she'll have friends, family, children, everything, but ultimately it is the person who will, as a soul, go alone and is traveling alone. So now the concept of Maya, for example, the world is an illusion, and that's what Radhakrishnan ji tried to justify, in his work, which is the Hindu view of life. And according to the religion, the Hindu religion, what Maya is that, for example, Narada, the one who did not even marry, Brahma's all the children, the Sarat Kumars and all, did not get married, they did not indulge into these practices. And so did Narada, they did not. But Lord Vishnu, for example, he was very proud. I'm just giving you a anecdote. He was very proud that he's a proud Vaishnav, and he's like a biggest devotee of Lord Vishnu. But what really happened was that God showed to him that it's very easy for a human being to fall in illusion of the world and become indulge in worldly affairs, and ultimately that dream is going to break. So one is the dream which one sees while sleeping, and one is the dream which one sees while awake. So this is the world. The world is something which is of awake, the dream which we are seeking of awake. So I guess Radhakrishnan ji was trying to justify this particular thing, and so yeah. So the Brahmgyan, the Advaita tradition respects even an atheist. Professor Minoti was raised a question last time. I could not speak because of lack of time, but I like to say that Indian tradition, for example, the monastic tradition defends the rights of the atheist as well, because Brahmgyani is almost like an atheist, and that person is an amazing amalgam of atheism and theism. So I mean, it's an accepted form. There is nothing like atheism not being accepted, and uh, uh, all religions being acceptable, because all human beings have the God spirit in them. So every human being, when they are gods themselves as individuals, why not respect them as your own self? So there is no question of demeaning a religion, a caste, a class, uh, uh, agenda, for example. I mean, I'll take my position from there. And I guess so that is the whole thing. And so the Hindu method of reform enables every group to retain its past association and preserve its individuality and interest. For as a student are proud of their colleges, so are the groups of their gods. So every human being, for example, I mean, uh, the Dravidian tradition, for example, spoke about the fact that we have the Lord Shiva as the deity, but before that, the Vedic tradition gave importance to the Narayana. So ultimately, what happened was that these two traditions got mixed up, and what Radhakrishnan ji gave example of was in the Hindu way of life is that when we meditate, for example, when I meditate, I my family is a die-hard Shiva fan, but my God, Lord Vishnu, chose me. But when I meditate myself, I see not just Lord Shiva, but I also, Lord Vishnu, who has chosen me to meditate on him, but also Lord Shiva, and also Lord the goddesses. So, and that is the prime thing. And you see all these things as they're like gods who perform these tasks for the people, as such. And I mean, so you just I mean, in fact, few days back, I mean, I could because of my belief in the religion, and as far as Professor Radhakrishnan ji was also said was there, you can see not just Allah, but also I mean, you can also see Lord Christ, in your meditations, and they give you the vibration, and it's just not worldly. It's just not worldly. I mean, it's not the way the people, for example, the Muslims are speaking, or the way Christians are speaking. It's my way of looking at it as an individual. My faith in the spiritual realm of the world, which exists beyond this world. What is beyond this world is very well explained in the Indic tradition. So we need to study a lot of Indic tradition to understand the depth of Hinduism. And I mean, as a cosmopolitan, for example, Dr. Radhakrishnan was also spoke about um, and the fact, the need for cosmopolitanism, and understanding of East and West and coming together of them. So, for example, the latest thinker, J. Derrida, for example, spoke about the concept of cosmopolitanism and hospitality of different cultures. And the left, the Marxists, for example, have spoken about that. How internationalism needs to be encouraged, and lower classes, lower as in not the lower as in poorer classes, and caste, for example, in India, the Marxists are talking about caste, and those castes have to be understood. So that has to be acceptable, and Dr. Radhakrishnan, uh, uh, Dr. Radhakrishnan was profound thinker in this particular regards. And so the Hindu theory that every human being, every group, and every nation has an individuality worthy of reverence is slowly gaining ground. And such a view requires that we should allow absolute freedom to every group to practice what they want to. So that's so beautiful. That's such a beautiful thought. I mean, the world's wars would have ended if Jews and Christians and Muslims did not fight, or Hindus or within themselves they did not fight, and they understood the concept. Right now we need peace. And how does that peace come in? That peace is going to come in by accepting a certain ideology. Can't talk about moral beings. A professor was talking about that, Professor Pradhan. And I mean, the whole concept of hermeneutics about dialogue. Habermas, for example, spoke about it. Iris Marion Young spoke about it. Many of the thinkers spoke about it. And, a dialogical, a real dialogue, not just superficial dialogue. You are really trying to understand, and that's what Radhakrishnan ji spoke about, that, we should communicate across differences and understand each other, so that a system whereby the tensions between cultures which exist, between castes which exist, and the animosities which exist should be done away with. And uh, the Hindu solution of problem of conflict of religion is likely to be accepted in the future. I mean, it's such a futuristic religion, and so are others. I mean, I'm not saying, I'm not commenting on any other religion, but the depth of Hinduism is definitely to be reckoned with. And the spirit of democracy, with its immense faith in the freedom to choose one's ends and direct one's course in the effort to realize them, makes it foreign. Nothing is good which is not self-chosen. No determination is valuable which is not self-determination. The different religions are slowly learning to hold out hands of friendship and to each other in every part of the world. Now, right now we see a lot of tension between Muslims and Hindus. That's a very sad thing. I mean, in a culture where we have adopted, Radhakrishnan ji said that, we have adopted different, India has a tradition from the Vedic times of accepting diversity, of accepting caste diversity and everything, and, so I guess diversity is the hallmark of the Indic religion. So, we have to understand that, Hinduism is not a narrow religion, it's an extremely broad religion. And a very, very deep, in depth study of Hinduism is required to understand that, what the whole structure is like. Even atheists are to, so as I said that, I mean, these things are, so the whole concept of मैं कौन हूँ is central to being understood as a Advaita theorist or a Brahmgyani. You are trying to understand yourself. So similarly, Ayn Rand also spoke about the fact, the qualities of altruism, moralism. The protagonist is like somebody who is a very perfectionist. So you could, I mean, I'm not really trying to compare, but like, I mean, sometimes the person is uh, a very moral being, who is being rejected by the society and taken advantage of, and at least shoved. And so the person shrugs the world. Similarly, in India, what happened? India, what happened? What I mean, the other religions do not understand. I mean, as far as my understanding concerns, Jesus was he never married, but there is controversy over it. Whatever. But so did many of our gods, did not, many of our rishis did not, or they just had carnal pleasure for bearing children. So I mean, so it could relate to many of the feminist views. So I mean, we could just connect things like that, and see that, this is what Hinduism is trying to make understand, is very contemporary and very futuristic. So has so so to some, it may appear that such collapse of world is a poor termination of to all our struggles, and so they picture to us to an eternal heaven or even eternal hell. There is nothing like it. There is nothing like, according to him, an eternal hell or eternal heaven. Birth and rebirth are eternal, and they are going to happen till the time the person, the human being, does not achieve moksha. So he speaks about, in the Hindu way of life, about the need for moksha. And so self-realization is what is extremely important to Radhakrishnan ji and to many of the Advaita thinkers, and people like me right now who is a present thinker and who is thinking on these lines, understanding the concept of Advaita and the Brahmagyan. And so yeah, and so um, yeah. Yeah, so the institution of caste, for example, illustrates the spirit of comprehensive synthesis, characteristics of the Hindu mind with its faith in the collaboration of races and the cooperation of cultures. Paradoxical as it may seem, the system of caste is the outcome of tolerance and trust. So, so though it has now degenerated into an instrument of oppression and intolerance, though it tends to perpetuate inequality and develop the spirit of exclusiveness, these unfortunate effects are not the central motives of the system. So, what he is trying to make the people understand is that it's not the central aspect of Hinduism. And if the progressive thinkers of India had the power, as they undoubtedly have the authority, they would transform the institution out of recognition. It's not the evils of the system that, according to him, he was concerned with so much as the underlying principles. So, Hinduism or Advaita Hinduism is concerned about the underlying principles, not dualistic kind of a way of looking at things. But a Brahmjani, for example, would pray equally to all the deities, but also believe in one God. This one God is also the basis of Islam and also the basis of Christianity, despite the denomination. I mean, every religion has several denominations. So now the caste, for example, could be slightly problematic here because people have radical views of it, and I mean, Ambedkar had different views on it. So we can understand that and very well understand that. But that's again the understanding of Advaita Hinduism, which gives us the insight to understand that this is what is required. And so yeah, so I mean, I um, so yeah, I mean, so what we need to the aim of the reformer should be to cure the defect and not to criticize the view. So what we need to do is not just um, uh, question it's to open our eyes to the truth. What is truth? Not to be orthodox, but to be open, modern, and extremely postmodern, post-truth. And Advaita religion is extremely post-truth, if it would be understood as such. And many of us scholars, people as of as the stature of uh, Professor Radhakrishnan, um, are immense help as the first president of India. And we were so lucky to have a scholar like him teaching us about this, and being a world teacher. And India, on India's Teachers Days, for example, we celebrate him. And I guess monism needs to be understood in its full essence. So that's what um, yeah, so he said, the clash of cults and contact of cultures do not, as a rule, result in complete domination of the one by the other. In all two contacts, there is an interchange of elements. Through the foreign elements are given a new significance by those who accept them. Many tribes and races have had mystic animals, for example, so people make fun of that. But Radha Krishnan ji explained that in a very elaborate way. And what he said was, many tribes and races had mystic animals. And when the tribes entered the Hindu society, the animals which followed them were made vehicles and companions of gods. One of them is mounted on the peacock, another on the swan, a third is carried by the bull, and the fourth by the goat. Enlistment of Hanuman, the monkey general, in the service of Rama signifies the meeting point of early nature worship and later theism. So the dancing of Krishna on Kaliya's head represents not just being anti-animal or something, but it represents the subordination, if not displacement, of the serpent worship, which was followed before this. So God was trying to give a God, or the universe, for example, through these deities, who were born as individuals and who died as individuals, and we need to understand that as well, in full truth. So Rama breaking of the bow of the Shiva signifies the conflict between the Vedic ideal and the cult of Shiva, who soon became the god of South. So yeah, there are other stories in epic literature indicating the reconciliation of Vedic and the non-Vedic faiths. It needs to be thought. It need not be thought that Aryans were all
Yes, Dr. Tamanna, please.
when once the cults are taken into Hinduism, alteration sets in. So obviously there is a mixture of cultures, and intermingling or inter dialogue creates a situation whereby Hinduism enriches, questions itself, and brings new light to the world, and so do other religions as well. They come up with their concepts, and but the fact we have to keenly tolerate each other is what Sri uh, uh, Radhakrishnan ji is talking about. And we need to understand each other, and that's the depth of Hinduism, and that's what light it could provide to the world, whereby people who do not understand cultures which critique Hinduism, for its deityism, for its dualism, should be made to understand what Hinduism really talks so much about. And we need to embark on a mission whereby we take the best from all religions. I mean, every religion is so beautiful. So all of the philosophies of the world, like liberalism, Marxism, postmodernism, etc., etc., they are all ways of life. So they are all ways of life, and they should come together to build a better world for us, a technology world whereby, people are more ethical and moralistic, rather than, being people who are, who are non-tolerant of other people and indulge in violence. And, so, I mean, that has to be really understood. So that is how much I would like to speak. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Taman. It was really deep presentation. Now I request respected participant to share their reflections, thoughts, questions, and comments. So may I invite with
May I,
Dr.
Randhir ji?
Yes, please, Dr. Alok Tandon, who is a Gandhian scholar and a deep student of philosophy. Yes.
Thank you very much, Randhir ji, and also Ananta bhai, for this inviting so many eminent scholars for talking about Professor Radhakrishnan's contribution to philosophy, not only in India, but world at large. I just remember that when I was a student of science, undergraduate student, I got the copy of Idealistic View of Life and the Recovery of Faith. And I thought that something very, very much inspirational will come out of it. But I was truly disappointed as a student of science. Now, I totally agree with Professor Sreekala Nair that the context in which Professor Radhakrishnan was working, that was the colonial context. And since the Western, so many Western thinkers and followers, they used to criticize Indian thought and tradition in a way that we are very barbaric and all that. So it was a time to recover our self-confidence. And in that process, we just tried to glorify some of our traditions also, and also try to put forward the best foot put forward, that is the Vedanta. But now that context is over, and we should now critically examine not only the Western thinkers, but also our own thinkers, and should not unduly glamorize them. So I would like to ask a few questions, and very small and pointed ones, to Professor Sreekala Nair and Professor Rasi Pradhan. First of all, when he talks about intuition, and you give some sort of justification of intuition through Platinga today, the question is, how can we verify an intuition? I know from the background of science that there are cases like the symbolic representation of benzene that came to Kekule in his dream. So such intuitional things did happen, and they were very much helpful for the development of knowledge, not only science. But the question is, unless and until that intuition is scrutinized, that is publicly tested, that is not acceptable. So if I say that most of the, and we can see that most of the gurus in today's times, when they claim some sort of mystical experience, they are all hypocrites, charlatans, and they just play with the minds of the common people. So if we give intuition such validity as we give to our sense experiences, then we are in a very, very dangerous path, because we can see throughout the world that these followers of various religions have been fighting throughout history, and is still fighting. A lot of bloodshed is coming out. With this remark, I would like to ask this question to everybody present here, that the idea of universal religion or some sort of Advaitic religion has been, or the Vivekananda's idea of universal religion has been in currency for the last 100 years. But that has not brought any fruit among the people. And people are still stuck with their own religions, because this idea is very thin, and it is dependent upon a spiritualistic view of man, neglecting somewhat the our scholars are calling the materialistic view of life, which is more dominant nowadays than the spiritual ones. And throughout history, we can see that this idea of universal religion has not been practical. So, should we not limit our religious ideals or religion to the few mystics only, and leave out the whole organizational and what we call institutional religions aside, instead of what the last presenter was saying, that every religion has got many good points and all that? We should reject all the institutional religions for the benefit of future humanity. This is the question to all. Now I come to my second question, and that is very specific one to Professor Sreekala Nair, when she said that Professor Radhakrishnan can we complain against that he tried to assimilate all our traditional diversity into one, that is the Advaita Vedanta. And here I am reminded of a comment by Mahapandit Rahul Sankara in his book Darshan, Big Darshan, and he vehemently criticized Dr. Radhakrishnan in his own time that he has reduced Buddhism to Advaita Vedanta, and that is completely wrong. So I would like to have a response from you, Professor Sreekala Nair, and I salute you and Professor Pradhan for their presence. But the science and scientism are two different things. And when we criticize science, we should be very much clear about the contribution of science for the knowledge and for the benefit of the humanity. And scientism may believe that everything can be done by science, but no senior scientist believes that. And we know that the question of values is outside the limits of science. So, but how can or how far can religion be helpful in filling that gap is always a big question, because this whole idea of uh, human beings being a sort of a spiritual entity is very much problematic. And Professor Pradhan knows very well that there is a riddle of consciousness which is yet to be cracked. And there are both the sides are giving their arguments, but that there is no finality yet received in this question on this question. So just to talk about glamorizing Indian thought, culture, and all that is, I think, we should be very, very skeptical about, as we should be with the claims of the Western thinkers. Thank you.
Now I request Dr. Gyan to share some of his reflection, and then.
Thank you very much. It was really very interesting. And I think that, well, a specific point of Radhakrishnan comes to my mind, that is that he opened very interesting perspectives, among other things, of course, as regards the similarities and analogies between ancient Greek philosophy and Indian philosophy. For instance, he underlined and was one of the first thinkers and interpreters who underlined this point that there are analogies, for instance, between the Katha Upanishad and the image of the chariot present in the Katha Upanishad as regards the structure of the individual, and some aspects which are in Plato's Phaedrus as regards the image of the soul as a chariot, which is used by Plato, and on the way in which in both traditions this image is used, that is as the sovereignty of intelligence over the other aspects of individual on the one hand, and the necessity of the command of intelligence over the other parts of the individual, furthermore, and on the point of the ruling power of the soul and of the necessity of the ruling power of the soul over the other parts of the individual. And moreover, Radhakrishnan also insisted on the point that both Katha Upanishad and Plato agree on the point that there should be an integration of the different elements of human nature. That is, that the human nature should be in its different parts, and in the difficulty coming from the presence of different parts in the human nature, that the human nature needs an integration and therefore a discipline, a study, kind of thread of self-dominance and of maturation, that the individual needs these integration should reach the integration of the different parts under the ruling power of the soul and of the intelligence. I think that this aspect which Radhakrishnan individuated both in the Katha Upanishad and in Plato, and the way in which he could analyze the analogies between Katha Upanishad and Plato, is a proof of the acuteness and of the sharpness of his philosophical interpretation. This is what I would like to say here. It was every contribution was really very interesting and very rich. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I request Ji to share some of her reflections.
Thank you. Am I audible? So I'm very thankful for being present in this very thought-provoking and deep, insightful presentation. I mean, I just, when Professor Alak Tondon was asking the specific questions, I also want to add to those questions to Professor Sreekala Nair. I mean, does philosophy change according to the scenario or to the situation? And for Professor Ramchandra Pradhan, it is like he was mentioning something about like that mind is playing the big role. So what are the more other psychological aspects of Radhakrishnan's views? And one more practical question I just want to ask, that is means what are the ways to imbibe these philosophical values of Radhakrishnan into the modern day teachers? So I would like to ask this. Thank you. Anybody else is there to, we can invite two more people, Mr. Pradeep Sahu, then next Francisco. So Pradeep Sahu, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, I do not have any question now. And as per the reflection, I would like to say that whatever is the intuitional knowledge we have, or whatever the intuition we do, this need not be challenged at any time, because this intuitional knowledge, what we get in our life, is very much personal to ourselves only, and it is true for ourselves, and it need not be somehow we have to justify it or we have to prove it. That is what I would like to say here. And as you asked, what are the practical things that has to be incorporated into the current day's teachers from Mr. Radhakrishnan? Yeah, that is the most practical question, and that is a valid question. But I do not have anything else to say now. So I would like to thank everybody and for the wonderful discussion that is very much reflective and very much beneficial. And so thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you. So now, Mr. Francois, your reflections and views on this. Then we'll invite Mr. Professor Pradhan to answer the questions. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Francois is taking some time. So now I invite Professor Ramesh Chandra Pradhan to please answer these queries. Professor Pradhan, please.
Thank you for these questions. First, I will respond to Dr. Tandon. His question was about science and religion, scientism, and also science taken together. Now, I do not confuse between science and scientism. Scientism is a philosophical view which takes science as the only model of understanding the universe. So, in that sense, if scientists themselves don't accept scientism, then well and good. What I am suggesting is that when we say science doesn't solve everything regarding human life, which Dr. Tamanna himself has admitted, we only say that it does cover a vast aspect of our existence, including the existence of the universe, but it doesn't solve everything. In that sense, Radhakrishnan was suggesting that perhaps a religion can step in and give us this spiritual aspect of our existence. If religion is taken as a spiritual religion, not in the organizational religion sense, then perhaps he is right that what science cannot do, religion can very much do it. That is, it can highlight or it can really give us immense knowledge of our inner life, that is our spiritual life. So, in that sense, perhaps Radhakrishnan is right to say that religion also can play a very creative role in shaping human life and the life of humanity as such. And he was suggesting whether we are glorifying Radhakrishnan out of context. Now, glorification is not the question. We are not really glorifying a hero. We are really highlighting the thoughts which are relevant to mankind. If Radhakrishnan was thinking for the entire mankind, then how can we say that we are really just glorifying him? He was talking about the entire mankind. If philosopher doesn't talk about entire mankind, then it will be a narrow sectarian philosophy. So in that sense, I do not understand why we should say that talking about Radhakrishnan in the positive way will be a kind of glorification. As to the question whether a philosopher can be only abstract and not practical, which Dr. Minati also asked, yes, it is practical. Philosophy is not just abstract thought. It is abstract thought, definitely, because any thought is abstract. But it is also something which can be put into practice. For example, when we talk about values in life, spiritual values, moral values, we are talking about life, which is practical. So it is not mere playing with words or playing with thoughts, abstracting from the concrete situations of life. It is not. Philosophy is very much a part of our own way of life. So in that sense, philosophy is both a way of thinking and also a way of life. So yes, with these, I think I will answer those questions which are addressed to me. Broadly, if we talk about Radhakrishnan's way of thinking, then certain Indian ideas are very much at the core, because he was rooted in Indian tradition. To say that spiritualism itself is not the only thought of India is true. We are not saying that Charvakas are spiritual philosophers, but Upanishadi thinkers are just spiritual philosophers. If a philosophy derives its strength from Upanishads and Vedanta as such, it is bound to be spiritual. If by spiritual we do not mean the Babas and Matas, I don't have any reference to them. So if Dr. Tandon thinks that spiritualism means that which is associated with these people, I totally agree with him. Philosophy should not be confused with the popular slogans and popular political messages. No. Philosophy has a sacred duty to separate that which is true from that which is false. So in that sense, spiritualism is about the truth of life, and it has nothing to do with any mystic or non-mystic says about philosophy. So in that sense, I think we must keep in mind that when we do philosophy, we do philosophy. We should not really mix it with all kinds of the slogans and petty ideological things. We should give up them. In fact, otherwise we can never do philosophy. So with these words, I thank all the participants and the organizers for giving me an opportunity to talk about the great philosopher Radhakrishnan. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. No, but I think I was asking about how those values can be imbibed in today's modern days teacher. I mean,
Yes,
it was not that question.
I will just, Minantiji, I
Abstract.
will just refer to this. Yes,
Yeah.
the modern man is not very different from the ancient man. We are all value seekers in certain sense. As a mother, we have the values of raising our children. It's a value, great spiritual value. As a teacher, we have a value of teaching the truth, not the falsehood. So in that sense, we pursue values in our day-to-day life. Without values, we cannot move forward. So even our ordinary life is a value-laden life. See, all activities of ours are embedded in some values or other. Of course, these values are there. We are not talking about the disvalues, the negative values. Talking about the values like goodness, like truthfulness, and like compassion and kindness. These values are part of us, and we do really practice in whatever form, however little that form may be. We do practice them. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
So now from last words from Dr. Tamanna Khosla, I think Professor Sreekala Nair is not there in the meeting. Tamanna Khosla, very quickly, 1 or 2 closing words, please, from you.
Yes, I'm extremely thankful to the speakers who were so interesting, and like what they brought about the table was very beneficial for me as a seeker and as a scholar. And as far as the Western world is concerned, my personal take would be that um, the philosophies and as well as the religions and the spiritual traditions should come together, and I guess the persuasion part should be the Hinduistic traditions, basic concept. So we should move our hands forward, and that should be reciprocated in the world. Right now we need, we have seen that many of our leaders are doing that right now, and because that is the tradition of Indian tradition. So I mean, being diplomatic, being I mean, Krishna was, for example, a big diplomat. So I mean, being diplomatic, being forthcoming, etc. So I mean, the concept of selfishness, as far as dual monism would speak about, that Ayn Rand's philosophy as well speaks about. So I guess we need to be very forthcoming to our friends in the world, and make them also come up with better ideas and better reformation of their concepts in a certain context. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So as we are rushing towards we are beyond our time. So I'll just quickly have a vote of thanks. I, Minati Pradhan, on behalf of Sadhya Sachakra and Vishwaneedam Center for Asian Blossoming, would like to thank today's our chief speakers, Professor Sreekala Nair, Professor Ramesh Chandra Pradhan, Professor Tamanna Khosla. All of you have presented us very deep, insightful, thought-provoking presentation. Thank you all. I also would like to thank Professor Alap Tandon, Professor Gyan Luigi, Mr. Pradeep Sahu, Mr. Franco, and the people who are present with us in our Facebook platform and here. And thank you all. Please pardon me if I have forgotten anybody's name. Thank you all. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.